Good morning, Wareham. It is Wednesday, May 29th. We have a great show here for you. The news headlines, the weather report, and today in history. In today's show, we are going to visit the New England Wildlife Center located in South Weymouth to learn about our wild animals. Also, we're going to learn about suicide prevention. And Bob Paulides is joining us for the coffee segment. But before we get to any of that, I would like to take this moment to thank Not Your Average Antiques, an antique shop down Cranberry Highway in East Wareham, for donating the props that you see in the morning show. So stay with us because the news headlines and the weather report are next. Cloudy skies with slight chance of rain showers today, high at 63 degrees. Overnight will be 49 degrees. Rainfall will be around half an inch. Tomorrow, also some clouds, slight chance of rain showers with high at 67 and low at 56. And there were a few news stories over the week here at the news headlines. This Monday was Memorial Day, and Wareham Week newspaper was there to cover every single detail of the commemoration ceremony. Starting as early as 8 a.m., members of the Wareham Veterans Council, Wareham Militia, Wareham Police Department, American Legion, Wareham Post 220, and the high school's Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps participated in a series of ceremonies at 9 locations in town. At each location, Robert Paulides, the president of the Friends of the Wareham Veterans Council, was there, in addition to Julia Roderick, who is a member of the Wareham Council, to place a wreath before the monument as a symbol of remembrance. At Bessie Park, the day's fourth stop, floating wreath was dropped into the water to honor those soldiers who had lost their lives at sea. And to our second news of the day, the Wareham Redevelopment Authority is hosting a public workshop which will include an introduction to the authority, preservation of the Wareham Economic Development Strategy, updates on current initiatives, and citizens' input and feedback. The workshop will be held twice, at 7 p.m. on May 30 and at 10 a.m. on June 1st, both at the Town Hall Auditorium at 54 Marion Road. And we're going to move on to our next news. The Oyster Festival last Sunday, was a big success. A lot of people turned out for that event. It was the 6th annual. Most vendors sold out their oysters, and people got to enjoy nice weather and what the festival had to offer. And to our next news, State Police, a Wareham State Police officer arrested 2 people for heroin trafficking. The trooper arrested Jacque Smith, 24 years old, of Onset, and Sean Penepinto, 22 years old, of New Bedford, after a traffic stop when they were found with about 400 grams of heroin in their backpack. The 2 suspects were transported to the Bourne Barracks. They are being held at the Plymouth County House of Correction on $250,000 bail for charges of trafficking heroin. Smith is also being charged for a lack of inspection sticker. And to our last news of the day, we can look at Wareham had the following press release. That is, the Buzzards Bay Rowing Club issues Onset Rowing Challenge. This Buzzards Bay Rowing Club's Onset Rowing Challenge will be held Saturday, June 1st at 10 a.m. from Onset Beach in support of its scholarship funds. The open water race starts and finishes at Onset Beach, and race courses are up to 3 miles. The organization is calling for all kayaks, canoes, rowboats, dollies, gigs, and whaleboats to participate. And now we're going to take a little break, and we'll be back with more. And now a visit to the New England Wildlife Center located in South Weymouth to learn more about our wild neighbors. This program took place in South Weymouth and also at their Cape Cod branch in Hyannis. So here it is, the wild neighbors. An episode of Dr. Dolittle in real life. This is wildlife care at New England Wildlife Center.
These are the most disenfranchised animals that veterinarians care for.
Established in 1983, its headquarters in South Weymouth to its recently acquired branch on Cape Cod, this nonprofit sees a wide range of patients.
There's 225 different species of wild animals that come to us, and there's about 150, 175 different species of non-traditional pets.
Even without insurance, these patients receive a comprehensive health care.
Each animal gets its own individual chart, medical chart, and they get tracked day by day.
Everything from x-rays, blood work, to a special diet. I bet they are so grateful. How grateful are they?
They're not very grateful at all. Our patients are not grateful. I mean, our patients want to be free. You know, it's like girls want to have fun. Wild animals want to be free.
Like this bunny who had a tibia fracture. Today, he gets released.
So the goal is for a wild animal to be released back into the wild, it needs to be self-sustainable. So that means it has to be able to find its own food, has to be able to escape danger, has to be able to find protection.
The majority of patients here are victims of human actions.
I would say 25% of our animals come in because they have lead poisoning. Probably 20% come in because they have rodenticide poisoning. So these are the after effects of the impact that people have had on these animals.
With that said, the mission here is simple.
Our goal and our mission is to be a safety net and to be a safe haven for sick, injured, and orphan wildlife in Massachusetts. We don't feel that we are good enough biologists to decide what animals are important and which animals are not important.
In other words, this is a good thing we're doing. We're trying to make these animals have a second chance. Any animal that doesn't come here is probably going to die in the wild. You know, it's either going to be eaten by somebody else, which is part of the natural cycles, or it's going to just lie and suffer until it passes away.
Like this harrowing story of a mama possum brought in with a split jaw from being hit by a car.
Police brought him in and he had a fractured jaw. Essentially right down the center of his jaw had split and separated.
Only to find out that he was a she, carrying 9 extra patients inside her pouch.
And they were so small at that point. Dr. Patel devised a way that she could actually wire the jaw shut. Now, this is not something we've ever done before with a possum, meaning that we had to really closely monitor to make sure the babies were still feeding, everyone was healthy, it wasn't overtaxing on mom. But she did really, really well. And actually the feeding tube came out a few days ago, earlier than we expected. Mom is eating her on her own with this piece of wire in there, self-feeding no problem, and all 9 babies have managed to stay attached and are growing every single day.
And the miracles do not stop there. Take the story of this Canadian goose.
This goose, was not having a successful existence with humans. You know, living around humans was not going well for this goose.
Animal control had been tracking this elusive goose, a victim of a crime.
It was found that he also had gunshot inside of him. He also was suffering from lead poisoning. And he actually died on the table, then was resuscitated, and then had a second operation, died on the table, was resuscitated. This was an amazing goose. And he was released back to the wild about 2 months later, which was incredible.
Incredible, because survival odds are poor.
Of the wild animals that we treat, 50% at best, 50% of them will make it back to the wild. 50% are going to die in the process. They're either going to be deliberately euthanized because they're carrying a disease that we don't want to spread to people or to other animals, or they have an injury that we just can't treat.
There are also budget and infrastructure factors that threaten wildlife mortality.
We have denied treatment of wild animals for both a lack of funding, but also a lack of stamina, also a lack of space. Like right this very minute in this building, we have 55 raccoons. 55 baby raccoons that have, mothers have been killed on the road, have befallen some sort of injury. Now realize each raccoon family has five babies in it, so we're talking about 11 families here that but we can't care. These animals need to be fed every 20 minutes. All that screaming you hear in the background is raccoons begging for food, and there are people in there feeding constantly, almost from sun up to sundown.
Take funding, for example. The hospital is by law required to provide the same level of care as of commercial veterinarian hospital without the state or federal aid.
If it was in a commercial setting, the average cost for every one of those animals would be about $100 per day. $100 a day, and multiply it times the 5,000 animals that we see that come into our centers. And then we multiply that times the average number of animals, the average number of days that these animals stay in the hospital. You're going to come up with a figure that is somewhere between $4 million and $7 million. Now that does not even come close to what our budgets are.
We are bound and constricted by how much funding we can raise. And I would say, you know, it caps how many animals we can treat. It also has this, there's always an edge to, okay, will we make it till next year? Will we make it to the following year? You know, because nothing is guaranteed.
What's your understanding to why wildlife care isn't receiving funding?
Everybody thinks it should be funded, but nobody wants to fund it.
Caring for wildlife seems a little bit off-center because we're caring for something that doesn't directly impact us. But the problem is it does impact us. The health of the environment and the health of the habitats we're living on is going to reflect in the health of who we are as people.
The uncertainty looming around funding comes as the need soars.
The need for veterinary care and rehabilitative care for wildlife continues to grow. Every year there's more and more because encroachment on the land is more and more, and they were here first. So the more we cut down trees, the more we disturb habitat, the more we introduce chemicals, the more that wildlife need from us.
The hospital tries to supplement its funding through their Odd Pet Vet program.
They bring in birds and reptiles, amphibians, and those animals get cared for here for a price, like a commercial practice, and 100% of those dollars go to the nonprofit, and that gives us about 20% of our funding.
In addition, the public can also drop off their odd pets at the hospital while they are away. There are a lot of areas of need, but what is the concentration right now?
That's a great question, because it's everything. I would say, though, that right now, the biggest thing we need in fundraising is individual donors.
As for now, the hospital's most valuable resource is its volunteers.
He still thinks he's eating.
Oh!
Oh my goodness.
Once more. Through its community approach efforts, the hospital works to bridge the gap between the community and nature.
We can't read about it in a book. We can't stay in and watch it on television. We have to be able to have safe contact, not unsafe contact.
Safe contact with the wild is introduced here through the wide range of classes, internships, and community service opportunities that are offered to all.
Howard told me to save the extra food out until the photography people get here.
Oh, gotcha.
All right, now what kind of turtles are these guys?
So those are also Diamondback terrapins.
All right, that's the same thing as what we saw in the other room.
New England Wildlife Center's doors are open here in South Weymouth or on Cape Cod. Come and get acquainted with your wild neighbors.
And learn about the animals from their backyard, learn about the wildlife that lives in our area. And they get to work right alongside of us with professional veterinarians and veterinary technicians and rehabilitators so that they are able to bring those animals back to the wild.
If you'd like to learn more about what New England Wildlife Center is doing, feel free to visit them on the internet. Just type in New England Wildlife Center. They have 2 branches, one on Cape Cod and another one in South Weymouth. You can volunteer, you can take a tour, or you can just, I don't know, you can stop by and see what they have there, what animals they have there. It's quite a cool place. Okay, so we're gonna move on to our second video of the day, and that is talking about suicide prevention. We're here because, I'm here because I would like to know about the NAN project. I have learned a little bit about the background story, your family, your daughter, your sister, who passed away due to mental health struggles. So let's start from there. Normally families would like to remember their loved one, would like to make their death meaningful. Was this the idea behind starting this nonprofit?
Yes, we started the NAN project more than 3 years ago because after the death of Nan by suicide, what we realized is that people don't talk about suicide. And there's such stigma and shame and judgment associated with stigma that young people who may be struggling, and there are so many that are struggling, are afraid to come forward. They don't know where to turn, they don't know how to ask for help, and I just don't want another family to go through what we've been through because of something that is preventable. Suicide is preventable.
Now, when you talk about the stigma, what was that stigma? Did you feel the stigma after your sister passed?
I think there was stigma. She felt stigma growing up. We knew from the age of 14 or 15 years old that she had mental health diagnoses. But because of the stigma that surrounds mental health, she was very resistant to getting treatment. And I think us as a family, we didn't really have the language to talk about her mental health struggles because there's such stigma that surrounds it. We knew very little about depression or anxiety and how to help someone that's struggling.
Now, you said it can be prevented.
Yes.
You strongly believe that suicide can be prevented?
I do believe that suicide can be prevented if we talk about it, if people are educated about it, if we know how to respond to someone who's struggling. You know, it can be as simple as asking the question, are you thinking of hurting yourself? And there's a myth that says that is something that may, let me say this again, it's a myth that if you say something about suicide, it will plant an idea. That's not true at all. It will bring relief to the person who may be experiencing suicidal thoughts. And it gives them the opportunity to know that someone understands what they're going through, or that they can talk about it, that they can ask for help.
So knowing that fact, how do you reconcile your daughter's death?
I think that's a very hard question to answer. I'm not sure I want to go there.
Okay. All right. So you started this project, this nonprofit, to raise awareness, right? We are working in schools. We are reaching out to the young children. Why there?
Because we saw that Nan really, her struggles were throughout school. And we really needed a jumping off place. So we started our work in high schools. We bring our young adults who have struggled with various mental health concerns, and we work with them to create what we call comeback stories, where they talk about what it was like to be a 16-year-old struggling with depression, or a 17-year-old with anxiety. But more importantly, what were some of those supports that they were able to access either within their schools or within their communities to get onto this path of recovery. We started with the high schools because we needed somewhere to start. But now we're moving into middle schools, we're doing some work with colleges. We're really just trying to spread this awareness around mental health and make this a conversation that people of all ages can have.
Okay, what are we learning about today's struggles, today's the problems that the youth are facing? I'm sure, not to date you, but what you went through back in high school may look very different
It's
from
very
what
different.
the young ones are going through
Well,
right now.
and I'm ancient, but Jake will tell you that it's very different. But what we're learning is that the rates of anxiety, the rates of depression just continue to skyrocket. Kids are struggling at much higher rates, and it keeps going up. Suicide is the second leading cause of death of young people.
Okay. So then we go to the schools. What do we say? What message are we sharing? Tell me about the conferences you have, the discussions that you have with the teens.
Right. So our model, like I said, is a peer-to-peer model. So we have young adults who go in and present their stories, talk about what it was like for them to struggle when they were in high school, with the idea of opening up that conversation around mental health and making it something that the students feel comfortable talking about in the classroom setting, making that classroom a safe space for them to open up and ask questions around depression, around bipolar disorder, schizophrenic, whatever that mental health issue is, and making that a comfortable place to talk about it, and more importantly, educating them about where they can go to support themselves or their friends. Who are those trusted adults that they can turn to when they need to?
Okay. Do we know anything when we're talking about stigmas? Who is at risk when it comes to suicide, mental health? Because some people would think, oh, that's suicide, it's a rich person problem, or they have a certain image. But what do we know from the work you're doing?
So I would say suicide is blind. It can affect people of all races, all ages. It affects us all. We do know that men are at 4 times higher risk of dying by suicide, but females are 3 times more likely to attempt a suicide. And that has to do with the means that males use versus females use. But white males aged 35 to 54 tend to be at the highest risk of suicide. But again, it's the second leading cause of death amongst young people. So it doesn't really differentiate among age, race, nationality. It affects us all.
Okay. So when we go to the schools and the peers share their stories, we open up the discussion. What follows? How long do you stay there to make sure that it continues to be a safe place?
Right.
And that is sort of the heart of the NAN project, is it is not a one and done intervention. We open up the conversation, but our goal is to keep that conversation going amongst the students, within the student body. And we do that by bringing into the schools a whole framework for how to continue the conversation around mental health, around suicide prevention, but also around emotional well-being. And we do that with our peer mentors, supporting the students, and often a student group, to hold events, to produce resource sheets that tell students where they can go if they're struggling, to have a stress-less week that they might have 1 week, to do extracurricular kind of activities and engage students in discussions around mental health. We want to normalize the conversation, and you can only do that over time. Begin to have that cultural shift where people equate mental health in the same way that they talk about physical health, because it is the same thing. It's all about health.
Now, according to CDC, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, it said that last year, their survey on mortality and life expectancy in the United States found that the national suicide rate is increased and has increased by 33% between 1999 to 2017. Right now, we hear a lot in the media regarding the war on drugs, war against opioids. We are facing a crisis. That's what our current administration is talking about, and the whole nation is responding to this. Do you think we are also facing a crisis when it comes to suicide?
Very definitely. Very definitely.
Absolutely. And I think it's all over. Sorry. Absolutely. And I think it's all related. You find most people who are struggling with substance use also have a mental health disorder. So there's a lot of overlap there. And a lot of these deaths by opioids, many of them could probably be classified as suicide as well. So I think it's a very connected crisis that we are facing.
When talking about the opioids crisis, depending on which community you're speaking to, there are those who would say we have been facing a crisis for a very long time. This crisis has not begun today. But the whole nation is aware of it because it impacted a certain person of certain demographics, right? So when it comes to suicide, why do you think, or do you think the same narrative would play in terms of why it's not out there, why the country isn't responding as it should? Because it hasn't impacted the so-called right victim to rally the whole nation.
I mean, I think suicide, you are seeing more discussion around suicide every time there's a celebrity death by suicide. So it is being talked about a little bit more than it was several years ago, but it's also the stigma that surrounds. There's a shame that people who lose a loved one, a friend to suicide, there's a shame that a lot of people unfortunately feel related to that. And until we kind of take away that and make people feel a little bit more comfortable talking about suicide, that stigma is going to remain there.
So how should we be talking about suicide?
Openly
Openly.
and with a very healthy concern about how we can reach out to young people, anybody who's struggling. How we can, I think one of the greatest protective factors is connection. To, if you know someone who's struggling, or even if you're just not sure, is to talk to, are you okay? How can I help? I'm here. I really care about what's going on with you. So, you know, if you don't want to talk now, maybe we could talk later. But I do care. I mean, it's really making sure that you connect and don't be afraid of it.
Do not be afraid of it. All right, thank you to both of you for sitting down with me to discuss about the NAN project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To smile.
And now we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Hello and thank you for being with us this morning. We're broadcasting live from our WCTV studio in Wareham. This is Good Morning Wareham, your source for local news, weather, traffic, and more information. And now for a moment in history, let's take a look at where we were today in history. In 1848, the lovely cheese-making state of Wisconsin became the 30th state to join the Union. Once part of the Northwest Territory, the state's citizens actually voted against joining the Union 4 times in the 1940s, but ended up joining because they saw other Midwestern states becoming more prosperous when joining the U.S. And also on this day, back in 1977, Janet Gauthier would be the first woman to ever drive in the Indy 500. Danica Patrick also on this day in 2005 became the first woman to take a lead in the Indy 500. Though neither of them ended up winning their races, Patrick would eventually win an Indy League race in Japan 3 years later. These women were pioneers in their sport. And to our last historical fact, today's special birthday goes to our former president, John F. Kennedy, serving as president from 1961 to 1963. He served as a leader in the middle of the civil rights era, a pivotal time in American history. He was assassinated on November 22nd in 1963 in Texas, cutting his term short, and so is his life. He has a museum in Hyannis remembering his life. That's just one of the many museums dedicated to the former president. And that's all for the history segment. To learn more cool historical facts, please go online under history.com. Stay with us. We'll be right back. The coffee segment is next. But first, let's take a look at our events calendar. Wareham. This is Good Morning Wareham, and we are broadcasting live from our WCTV studio. Right now is the coffee segment, and with me is Bob Paulides, the chairman of the Friends of the Wareham Veterans Council. This Monday was Memorial Day, and Bob had a busy schedule visiting all the monuments around town to lay a wreath and to salute the veterans, to commemorate their great sacrifice. And also there was a wreath. You kind of let it go in the water.
Yeah, for those who lost their lives,
the lives
at sea.
At sea, okay.
Right.
So I have Bob today to talk about the Friends of the Wareham Veterans Council, who they are, what they do, and their relation to the council, to Wareham Veterans Council in town. Last week, we had Skip Sinelli, who is the chairman of Wareham Veterans Council, and he kind of alluded to some, I wouldn't call them rumors, but he kind of alluded to some tension that is taking place between them and the Friends. So I have invited Bob to clear the air and to get his side of the story. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you for having me. Before I get into the tension...
Absolutely. We're going to talk about who the Friends are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Before I talk about who the Friends are, I'm going to talk about Memorial Day.
Okay. Tell us about Memorial Day.
Last Monday was Memorial Day. And groups of organizations worked together. The Wareham Police, the American Legion, the VFW, the JROTC, and the council, the Friends, the Historical Society, all worked together to go to 9 locations throughout the town where there are a straight service of recognition to those who served and gave their lives to recognize and to pay tribute to those. I would say from the outset, it was disappointing from the point of view of the turnout at all of these locations. For a town of this size, there were very few of the citizenry that came, even though the schedule was in the paper, very few came. It was the people that came all throughout the different locations were basically people that were going by, they stopped and got out and saw. We had a collation put on by the Historical Society put on down at Agawam, which is halfway through, and it was just a collation for those that had gone through the process and got to that point. And it was just coffee and donuts and water. But it was, I would say, just disappointing for these people to go out and spend from 7 o'clock. We met at the Legion, got the rifles ready and prepared, and started here and got through, and probably get through at 12:30, 1 o'clock up at Town Hall at the final memorial. But even there, the numbers were very, not even 10 people from the population. No officials, none from the organizations, just those that were participating. So it's disappointing because we go there and repeat the same thing to ourselves, not to other people. So thank God for the WCTV and the media who were there and broadcast it so that people could get to see what it was all about. So that is my position. Next year, maybe we can do something different. A couple of years ago, after the moving wall was here, Bob went on vacation. He was the former president or chairman of the Veterans Council, and nobody was picking up the ball for the 1917 Veterans Day ceremonies in town. So I don't know what's going on. So some of us got together and we had a quick rush, modified, respectable ceremony. It was cold day that day, and we moved it from outside to inside at the multi-service center. Next year, this coming year, I think last year was the 100th anniversary of Armistice Day, Veterans Day. So we need to do better, or we figure out other ways to engage public officials as well as the citizens.
Okay. Now let's talk about the Friends. Who are the Friends?
Here are the Friends. I'm going to tell you who the Friends are. Not what other people think they are, wish they were or would like them to be. We are a separate, independent, non-profit charitable organization established to entertain requests and recommendations for programs, activities, events, and projects for the benefit of veterans suggested by the Council, veterans organizations, DAV, Legion, VFW, etc., including but not limited to other organizations with patriotic and veterans component, included but not limited to the Elks, Knights of Columbus, etc., and so forth. And any other community organization acting on behalf of veterans, and to receive and disperse funds accordingly as voted by the board. So that's who we are.
Was that the initial doctrine? Was that the initial definition of the Wareham, the Friends of the Wareham Veterans Council?
No.
Okay, what was the original?
The original said they were a stepchild of the council. But after the wall, we had a reorganization. We looked at the bylaws. They were inconsistent, and
Tell us about the inconsistency.
there was inconsistencies in the relationship, inconsistencies in how they operated. I just got through telling you they're a separate, independent, nonprofit charitable organization under the federal IRS regulations, 501c3. Separate board of trustees. They are fiduciaries. They are trustees for the funds they raised. Therefore, it is inappropriate to be directed, ordered, or told how to spend the money. The council is a advisory committee to the selectmen. Nowhere in their bylaw does it say they are the tail that wags the dog, namely the Friends. There shall be a committee, one member here. They may have other associate members. The council shall elect officers. The purpose of the council, not what people think, not what they wish. This is what we try to bring it back to the way it's intended to be. They're a town committee, operate under the open meeting law, the Chapter 268A, the ethics law, and municipal finance law that says any town committee, board, commission, city, town, whatever, is to operate within their appropriation. It is illegal, punishable by fine or imprisonment, to expend funds in excess of your appropriation or to incur liabilities in excess of your appropriation. So that's the difference. It would be a conflict in irregular, improper for an outside entity, a separate entity, to dictate to another entity. That's like for me going to the Ford Foundation, the Mellon Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, and saying, here's a bill, I want you to pay it.
Okay, let's take it.
Let me finish
Okay.
now. You asked the question,
No,
right?
but I'm saying
I
wanted to do I want to give our
I'll give you all
foundation.
Of that. I'll give you all that. Let me finish this now. So here's that. And it says they are to advise the Board of Selectmen,
Yes.
okay, on all kinds of things about Veterans Day and Memorial Day, of the community events, and make awareness of those events. So that's what they do. And
Okay.
if you can read this way, this
Yeah.
way, this way, this way.
So the Friends of the Wareham Veterans
So
Council was created by Bob White,
Right.
because before Bob White, the Veterans Council
Right.
gets their funding from the town, right? They get a sum of money to take care of what is happening in regards to Memorial Days or
I don't know
other
what they get this.
celebration.
I've never seen their
So, the
appropriation or
council-
what it says it's for.
Okay, so the council gets funding from the town, appropriated by the town.
Right.
The Friends were created because when the moving wall was coming to Wareham, it required a bigger budget, one that the town wasn't going to supplement.
Right.
So, and because the council cannot fundraise, then they needed another entity, another organization,
Right.
as you're saying, that separate organization, a nonprofit organization
Right.
that can fundraise on behalf of the
Right.
Veterans Council. Hence, the moving wall came to Wareham, a big success, right? And I asked Bob yesterday, I said, if we do not have bigger projects like the moving wall,
Like the monument.
like the monument, okay, on Cape Cod, right? If we do not
At
have
Hero Circle,
Hero Circle.
outside the entrance to the Veterans National
No,
Cemetery
cemetery.
of Massachusetts.
if we do not have bigger events such as that,
Right.
can the council still come to the Friends and say, we need the money? And the answer is technically no.
No, the answer is technically yes. I just read this. What did I say?
So even though they do
Excuse
not
me,
have,
Did I say that we, the Friends, entertain requests from the council and others who have something to do that suits the purpose of benefiting veterans?
so if veterans have, if the council has the funding in their bank that can supplement whatever their project is, can they leave that funding out and come and ask for your funds?
There's another misunderstanding. If you get funds to appropriated, you're not supposed to leave it idle, unuse it, where it reverts back to the town and the town uses it free cash. You've got money, use
You gotta
your money.
use it first before coming to you for additional money.
And you should come to us early on with a budget telling us what you do, because we have the responsibility to digest and interpret and decide what our priorities are going to be. Okay? So, here's one of the things that happened, a big mistake, big misunderstanding. Let me go back to another thing. The Friends, okay? I got a call from Susan Williams Gifford telling us about the Liberty Medal Award. It's a new award the Commonwealth has been giving out for 3 years. She called me. I was preoccupied with other situations. I called Kevin Ward, a member of the Friends, a member of the Legion. He got in touch with Tootsie Russell, and together, the Wednesday before Memorial Day at the State House, 16 individuals across the state who were awarded the Liberty Medal to men and women of the Commonwealth killed in action or who died in the service while in the designated combat area in the line of duty or died as a result of their wounds. So because of them contacting us, two of our people from Wareham were recognized. They were Tech 4 Roland Nolet from West Wareham, World War II Army, and PFC Carlos Rose, USMC Vietnam. So that's one of the things, one of the many things we do, and we don't, as you alluded to before, have to get permission from the council, because we have a broader perspective. We are inclusive, not exclusively their puppy.
Okay, so
now
okay.
let me go to this.
Well, we have 10 minutes, so let's
Let
guide
me
the conversation.
Let me take 2 of those minutes
Okay.
to explain to you. So every year, the council has a few things they do regularly. One of his laying of the wreaths across the veterans' places.
What you did
with flags,
this Memorial Day.
No. Before, on Memorial Day, we go across town at the cemeteries and the bridges and so forth and put a marker and a wreath and a flag. We paid last year $1,000 for that. We paid in 17 for that. This year they came to us and also went to this flag company. The bill is made out to the Wareham Veterans Council. Never came to us first. I know it's routine.
So whose event is that? Whose event is that?
Whose event is it?
The laying of the wreath and planting
It's
the flag.
everybody's event.
Okay, so that's
They recommend it. It's one of the things that the town
do.
does.
Okay, and
the
which-
town does.
and which you
Veterans
help
Day,
the
Memorial Day, and we participate. So
and
one
you
of the
help them
things-
financially.
We did.
Okay.
So this year, we started to look back, and I keep seeing 144 markers, 144 markers, 144 markers. I talked to the maintenance department. He says to me, what's going on here?
Yeah.
They're putting Korean veterans markers on World War II and Vietnam, on World War I, and all this stuff. It says it's mixed up. We've got hundreds of markers in the basement of the Legion Hall, 1,000 flags. So why would a town committee who gets scarce money appropriated by the town be going out and renewing the order every year, 144 markers, 144 markers? So they gave our treasurer secretary the bill in, by the way, in a not pleasant, friendly manner in their reaction to her, and dictated that we pay this bill. So she contacted the company. These people automatically renew this thing. Number one, if they need 12 markers, they should buy 12 markers. Replace the ones that the lawnmowers ruin or the kids steal. That's what you should do. We have a fiduciary responsibility. So does anybody who's working for the town to not to waste, abuse, and misuse funds.
Okay.
So that's, unfortunately, other people aren't watchdogs. I am.
Okay,
It's
what
my
did you
nature.
find out?
So what did I find out? Number one, they got a $936 bill. I called up the guy and I said, this was in March. And on March, another day in March, they incurred a bill of March 21st, and they gave for more markers and stuff, and they gave that, I think that was paid by the Veterans Council. The Veterans Council also denied to pay some of the bills because he said that you can't use their money on town property. And he said it. That's his issue. I don't know. I believe him.
Okay,
But the
let's talk
point
about what you found out.
is. So then I talked to the guy and I said, "How about giving us a courtesy discount?"
You asked for the discount, okay?
Yeah. So this is what I'm saying about a fiduciary.
Yeah.
Look for the best negotiated price. So instead of $936, it's $792.
Okay.
Okay. So then I find out that out of their $1,000 appropriation that they got last July 1st, which it ends this June 30th, they spent $290 something, and they have $702.20
Left.
So why do they come to us to pay a bill when they've got money?
And that's what I was saying.
And they can't say, well, we're saving that for something else. You pay your bills and don't incur bills and give it to other people. If I put a roof on my house, I don't take the bill and go over to my neighbor and say, pay the bill.
Bob,
So
okay, we
I
have
went
5
to
minutes.
these
Bob,
5 minutes. I
5
went to
minutes.
these people years ago and I said, you want to work together? We work together. But we gave them a form and an application on how to present a request, and they said, you do what we tell you to do. When I went to we've had a meeting with two of their individuals and the selectmen and me. They entered the room after the first missing the first meeting and coming to the second, and they said, I don't know why we're here. We don't like you.
All right. So I have 4 minutes. Bob, let me ask another question. Bob, let me
I'm
ask
willing to work with anybody.
Fantastic. Let me ask another question.
It's got to be a mutual,
Okay.
like a union, like a contract.
Fantastic.
Two people working together.
Bob,
if you
another
don't want to
question.
work together, then we can plenty of things to work along.
Okay.
Let
me
tell
ask you
now,
another question.
Let me tell you
Bob,
another thing.
We have 3 minutes.
Yeah,
Let's
let me
put
tell
another
you.
question so
I'm
people can
taking
know
the 3
more.
minutes. I want to tell you, this is what we do. This is what we do. We put up empty chairs, POW, around town. Town Hall, we gave one to the schools, we gave one to the Elks, kept one to the Legion, one to the State House. I was in the State House. We got the state to change the name of the Otis Rotary to Hero Circle. So this is why we don't respond to everything, and we take the big picture. Like I said, we're inclusive. Here's a letter I got. It is an honor for me to be able to send you a modest donation towards the proposed Rotary Memorial Monument. I was so glad to read about this project. I had planned to attend Steve Baptiste fundraiser dinner, but couldn't. This gift is in memory of my late husband, Lou Hulbert, who was a Wareham police officer for many years as a young man.
Bob.
Wait, let me finish. It's only a minute to read
Yes,
this.
but I have
it
2
means,
minutes.
It makes
We
a
have 2
point.
minutes.
Well, we'll
Yes.
extend, okay?
But we can't extend. It's
Well,
a live
then-
show. So
yeah, well, then
okay,
this
so
is important.
What I am
This
getting,
is important.
Bob,
I'd like to say this.
Truly, please. What I am getting from this is, because we need to summarize this, we have only 2 minutes. You, Friends of Wareham Veterans Council, not only do they help the council, you also help other organizations around the region who have to do with veterans, right?
Right,
You work with the Elks. You work with
Yeah,
the Monument in Bourne. You plant
We
a
raise
wreath and
money.
you
We
raise
do that,
money.
yeah.
And that money,
and we
which
do the
your
chair.
point, yes, your
And
chair,
we-
that
and-
money is
and
not
we-
exclusively for the Wareham Veterans Council.
No.
That money is
It's
for
it's
everybody that
yeah,
has. That's my
right.
point, because we
Yeah,
need to
that's
summarize
my point.
this. Very good.
Yeah,
but
that's my point.
Yeah.
We also use our money, their money,
So
the friends'
for
money
2 minutes that
to
we have.
put up flags across
2 minutes that we have.
town with
Okay.
POW MIA flags. But this woman,
It's a wonderful letter, but for the
she's
2
proud
minutes.
to go by and see that monument looking down
Beautiful.
on veterans
Cemetery, the National
coming
Cemetery.
through to bury their loved ones.
So for the 2 minutes we have, for the
Yes.
2 minutes that we have, okay, the Wareham the Friends of 1 minute actually, the Wareham Friends of the Wareham Veterans Council do a lot,
The
and
chair.
we thank you, right? So I think at the end of the day, it's the misunderstanding between the council and the
It's
Friends.
an unwillingness to understand.
Okay.
That's what it is.
All right.
And you, as my father would say to me years ago, young man, it's hard to penetrate a concrete block. If you don't want to understand and you don't want to listen, you will not listen. If you
Okay.
want to open your mind, I'm open, we're open, we work with anybody. If people want to work with us, we want to work with anybody else. And
All right, so we have 30 seconds. I need to thank you for coming. And I'm
Thank you
sorry.
for having
I'm
me.
sorry that we couldn't dive into everything and you couldn't
but
finish your letter.
This letter is a fantastic letter.
It is.
And she tells how
It
it's
is.
so meaningful for her
To see
come
the
by and
monument.
visit her husband's grave, who was badge number 1.
Okay, I have
and his
10
badge
seconds.
is on his
Thank
tombstone.
you so much for joining us this morning. I am sorry the coffee segment kind of got a little out of hand.
No, it wasn't
It's a
out of hand.
passionate topic.
It needs to be said.
We'll be back on Friday with more. And if you didn't watch this show this morning, we'll re-air this evening at 6 p.m.
Yeah.
So thank you, Wareham,
And I
have a
apologize
wonderful
for
day.
my passionate demonstration.